Good afternoon, folks. Before I introduce Heather, introduce our special guest, we have some acknowledgments I'd like to make. In the audience today, you've already met this morning our former governor, David Paterson, who is here. We have sent applause. Senator Tom O'Mara is here. Assembly member John McDonald is in the audience. We thank them both for coming as well. Some of the governor's staff identify who they are. Deputy Director of State Operations for Policy, Andrew Kennedy, is here. Andrew Kennedy's parents are in the audience. President, CEO, and Commissioner of Empire State Development, Howard Zemsky, is in the audience. The New York State Office of General Services, the Commissioner, the Great Commissioner, Oanne DeStito, is here. Director of Upstate Revitalization, Rich Toby, is in the audience. And also Leslie Watley, who is Executive VP at Empire State Development and Head of Startup New York. And it gives me great pleasure, before I bring her up, I make a point of personal privilege. A man is in the house here who was not only a friend, a colleague for the last 4 years, who does a tremendous job. And I would say, as an upstate person, I've said this in office, and I'm not in office any longer, no one in my memory ever invested more money in economic development upstate New York than this governor has, and I could bear witness to that, not only in our hometown, but around the state. So we're proud to have him in the audience today. And as little side stories, we're walking down the hallway, Heather slipped, and who caught Heather? The governor. So the governor, we'll be giving a life-saving award at our next annual meeting to Governor Cuomo. And please welcome the President and CEO of our Business Council, Heather Bracetti. Heather.
That, by the way, is absolutely true. And he saved me from falling completely on the floor. So I want to thank the governor for that. It is really with great pleasure that I introduce and welcome Governor Andrew Cuomo for the second year in a row to our annual meeting. I want to say that if we look back over the last 5 years, his track record on very big issues of broad importance to the state's business community is excellent. 5 consecutive low-growth, on-time budgets that have brought state spending growth and year-to-year deficits under control. Broad-based business tax reform, which we worked as an organization very hard on, with $600 million in annual savings when it's fully implemented in 2016. Reduced compliance and audit businesses, which are really, really important to many, many of our members. Estate tax reforms that will eliminate the death tax for 9 out of 10 estates, and long-sought reform for the state's family businesses. And then, most importantly, or for many, many businesses most importantly, adoption of and extension of a statewide cap on real property taxes, the largest tax paid by the vast majority of businesses in New York, especially small business. And an initiative whose aggregate savings to date total more than $7 billion so far. He's been supportive of higher education standards, something that's very, very important to us, and has supported the PTEC initiative, has been supportive of charter schools. I have a huge list here that I could go on, but I think no one wants to hear from me. We all want to hear from the governor. So with that, I think I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming Governor Andrew Cuomo to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be back. It was a pleasure to take the ride up this morning. You know, every time I come upstate, I'm just blown away by the beauty and the nature and the majesty. And Lake George, I think, is prettier this time than any other time of year. So it truly is my pleasure to come up. Just for the scenery and especially for the company. First, let me send my thanks to a man who I miss every day, who was a great member of the administration, is now a great member of the business community, former Lieutenant Governor Robert Duffy, who's doing great work. I know he's doing very well because he is wearing 3 ribbons, which I think is I don't see many other three. Stand up and show them your 3 ribbons, Bob. See, now I know why he left. We didn't do ribbons in this state. But we're going to start, live and learn. And if you had stayed, you would have gotten 4 ribbons. I just want you to know, because you are a 4-ribbon kind of guy. So congratulations to him and his 3 ribbons. We're also here with former Governor David Paterson. Let's give him a round of applause. Governor David Paterson has no ribbons, but I understand he refused to wear the ribbons because he thought they clashed with his suit. Governor David Paterson actually was governor at a very difficult time in the state. You know, when you read the history of this state or any other state and the governors, a governor has to play the cards that they're dealt, right? And a governor is a governor at a particular time. And Governor David Paterson was there at a very difficult time because it was just when the economy was shifting, and shifting dramatically. And people don't like to hear bad news. They really don't, in any context. They especially don't like to hear bad news in politics. Politicians don't like to give bad news because they want to make everybody happy, so everybody votes for them. So it becomes a question of character. And Governor David Paterson had the political courage to stand up and say, the economy has turned, the revenues are down, we have to cut the spending. I don't care if you want to, I'm telling you we have to. And that was a very difficult message, but he did the right and responsible thing as governor of the state of New York. Let's give him another round of applause. My colleagues, Senator O'Mara and Assemblyman John McDonald, are here. I want to thank them for their partnership. You know, one of the things that's worked in Albany is that it has worked, right? You look at Washington, D.C., you see the gridlock, which to me, gridlock is the most offensive form of politics. Because what they're saying in gridlock is, I would rather stand true to my political position and play my own politics than compromise and get something done. Because gridlock is the worst option. Gridlock is nothing happens. And when nothing happens, everybody loses. And it really is self-indulgent political officials who engage in gridlock. In Albany, it's not that we agree all the time. Believe me, Tom and John are wrong a lot, but we have our discussion, we have our debate, and we come up with a compromise and we decide to move forward. Because that's responsible governance as opposed to unfettered politics. And I want to thank them and applaud them for their statesmanship, because they are. Tom O'Mara and John McDonald. I want to applaud Heather Burchetti for her leadership and her skill. She's handled a lot of difficult issues, and she has done it extraordinarily well, and she's a great leader, and you're lucky to have her. Let's give her a round of applause. And I can't tell you how excited I am about this life-saving story. And I'll tell you why, Heather Burchetti. Now, the facts are, just so we establish the facts and we have our story straight, Heather was walking down the hallway in front of me. There was a slippery spot in the hall where something had been spilled. She slipped. She was headed for a very harmful and possibly life-threatening fall. I was several feet behind her, launched myself into the air, timed it perfectly where just before she was to hit the ground, which was concrete, I reached out and grabbed her with one hand and supported her entire body with one hand and lifted her up so at no time did any part of her body actually touch the concrete floor. That is my story, verified by the Lieutenant Governor, who was there with a hands-on witness, and is a bona fide member of the business community. That is my story. And I'll tell you why I'm going to cling desperately to this story. because my little brother Chris, who can be quite offensive, has been telling a story for the past 4 weeks where he saved somebody's life in the Long Island Sound who was drowning. Now, the story is told just by my brother Chris, you see. But since he's on CNN, he has publicized to the world this life-saving story. So I like my life-saving story better, and I like the fact that I have validators on my story, including Heather and the Lieutenant Governor. So I am very happy that I am here today. And today's a great success. If nothing else happens today, I want you to know. Let me thank all the members of the Business Council for your partnership and your goodwill. We've worked through a lot of tough issues, and issues where nobody winds up 100% happy, and issues that could have brought frustration and brought gridlock and brought bad feelings, but we managed to work them through. And I think that's a new culture that we have brought to this state, and I think it's a culture that's working. I also want to applaud all my team members who are here today, who have done a lot of good work with you. And I have a presentation I'd like to go through about where we are, where we think we're going, and then questions that you might have would be my pleasure. So this morning, I want to tell you a story. So a guy walks into a bar and orders a drink, and he says to the bartender, no, that's the wrong story, I'm sorry. Different story. I want to tell you the story of the New York economy. And it's a tale of two New Yorks in many ways. It's a story of the upstate economy, and it's a story of the downstate economy. The downstate economy has been doing well, and it's been doing well for a while. It has the financial sector, but it's also diversified its economy intelligently. Over the past 20 years, New York City is a different place than it was. You know, it's not the dangerous, dirty place that it was. It's amazing. My daughter called me during the summer, and it was about 11:30, and she said, I'm getting on the subway. And I said, no, you can't get on the subway at 11:30. And she said, Dad, everybody's on the subway. You know, but my knee jerk, when I was a kid, you didn't get on the New York City subway at 11:30 at night. But it is a much different place. Tourism is up, and the economy, there are ups and downs, but basically the trajectory is up. For downstate, over the past 2 decades, it gained 5 times more jobs than upstate New York. Upstate is the exact opposite story and the exact opposite trajectory. It's experienced decades of decline, which are a combination of bad government policy and changes in the private sector. So it's not one or the other. The state has been overspending, and the state has been overspending for years. Chronic overspending by the state of New York. It's a very simple equation. When you spend a lot of money as a government, you have to raise taxes, because that is the source of revenue. Why do we have high taxes in New York? Because we spend a lot of money. That's it. That's the whole equation. You don't need an algorithm to figure it out. And also, we had years of government gridlock, where every time it came to do a budget, you remember the Democrats and the Republicans would fight, and they would point fingers, and they would do their politics at the expense of government. We lost manufacturing jobs through no fault of our own. The economy shifted, and businesses became more mobile at the same time. So people and businesses started moving outside of upstate New York. You put all of that together, and it was a dramatic problem for upstate New York. You know the numbers, but the national population growth, 15 times higher than what was happening in upstate New York. Job growth, half the national rate in upstate New York. And there was a sense of devastation in upstate New York that started to feed on itself, because there's an energy about this. People start to feel the economy is going bad, the economy starts to go bad. You know, they talk about consumer confidence. I spent a lot of time in Washington studying consumer confidence. Part of the market is the psyche. People believe that the economy is coming back in their area. They invest. They buy a house. They fix their house. They invest in their business. People feel the opposite, and you have disinvestment. 4 years ago, Bob and I say, we're going to turn around the upstate economy. And people said it was just a fool's errand. Every governor and lieutenant governor come in and say, I have a dream, we're going to turn around the upstate economy. It's been happening for 50 years and nothing happened. We developed a very detailed plan and we enacted it. It had 2 steps. First step, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Very sound advice. New York had to get taxes under control. We were taxing people out of the state of New York. We were chasing them out of the state of New York. Because we were spending, we were taxing. This is the story of New York, and this is fascinating. And I don't want to give my Republican friends heartburn. Okay, a little bit I do. This is the story of the state of New York for 50 years. This is all you have to know. It's on one chart. Governor Nelson Rockefeller, Republican, spent over his term 11% more every year. Spending went up 11%. Republican. Hugh Carey comes in, spent 7.9% over his average over his term. Mario Cuomo, 6.9%. George Pataki comes in, reaction to Mario Cuomo and the wild spending liberalism, he spends 5.2. So 1.7% difference makes a conservative versus a wild spending liberal. In any event, and I was listening to Governor Pataki the other day on the presidential debate saying how he got spending under control in the state of New York. That is 50 years of New York State. Meanwhile, the inflation rate is 4.1. How was inflation going up at 4.1? Rockefeller spending almost 3 times the rate of inflation. Carey, 6.9, 5.2. Everyone is spending more than the rate of inflation. Where is it going to come from? You were taking a bigger and bigger piece out of the taxpayer's pocket. And your costs were going up in excess of inflation. And there is no reason for that. That means you're just not showing fiscal discipline. That's what the inflation index is. So we come in and we said, look, there's only one solution here. We have to cut spending. And we're actually going to show fiscal discipline. And we're going to take it to the legislature and we're going to break the gridlock, but we're going to insist that we cut spending. And we said we were going to cut spending to 2%. That was our first message. And they said we were crazy. And then I said, okay, the 2% was Bob's idea. Maybe Bob is crazy. But we said it's going to be 2%. And the question then becomes, did we hit the 2%? We didn't hit the 2%. We came in under the 2%. We came in at 1.4% spending. Look at the difference. You want to know why New York State has turned around? Because of that change in spending. It has been the lowest spending rate in 50 years. And all this political garbage, the Democrats like to spend money, the Republicans don't spend money, I'm conservative, I'm liberal. It's all political jargon. The numbers tell the story. We have brought down the spending in this state to a lower level than it's been in 50 years versus Democrats, versus Republicans, versus any of them. And then, by the way, after we brought it down to 1.4%, they said, well, you did that 1 year, but you can never do it again. And then we did it a second year. And they said, well, you got lucky a second time, but you'll never do it again. And then we did it a third year, and a fourth year, and a fifth year. And we have done it every year for 5 years in a row. And we passed the budget on time, by the way, in the meantime. Because we got spending less, we can now tax less. The spending is the key. If your caloric intake goes down, good things are going to happen. If you are spending less money, then you can tax less. And if you're taxing less, then you're stimulating the business economy. And we brought down taxes all across the board. Everyone in New York State pays a lower tax rate today than the day I took office. Every New Yorker today. Unless, of course, you made a lot more money and then you went into a different tax rate. But could be worse. The lowest middle class tax rate since 1953, the lowest corporate tax rate since 1968, the lowest manufacturer's rate since 1917. We even handled the #1 tax problem in the state of New York, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the state government. You know what the #1 tax is? Property tax. Far and away, in raw dollars, the most oppressive tax is the property tax. We have the highest property taxes in the United States of America. And by the way, they're not downstate. Downstate, in terms of absolute dollars, Westchester Nassau pays the most in absolute dollars, but as a percentage of home value, which is actually more telling, it's upstate New York. The highest in the country, Wayne County, #1 in the county in property taxes. This, my friends, is what's causing people to leave the state of New York. And this has been the largest burden for upstate New York. After 20 years of talking about it, we actually passed the property tax cap, which says you can't raise your taxes more than 2% to school districts and to local governments unless you get a vote of 60% of your population. No local official actually wanted to go to raise the property tax cap, so we've had more than 90% compliance with the property tax cap. Combined, our tax reforms have saved billions of dollars. Our 2% spending cap on the state side, $83 billion saved over 5 years. Our property tax cap, 15.9, our income tax, $12 billion, property tax, $2 billion, estate tax, $150 million, total savings, $114 billion. You know why Heather Bruschetti likes me? Not because I'm good looking, not because I'm charming, not because I'm witty, because I saved her $114 billion. That's why Heather Bruschetti likes me. And because I saved her life. We also turned around the state's credit ratings. We have the highest credit rating from S&P since 1972, the highest from Moody's since 1964, and Fitch has given us their highest rating ever. We've changed the fundamental stature of business, the business environment in the state of New York. Even the Tax Foundation, which is a very conservative group, said that we have taken a tremendous step towards turning around New York from a tax point of view. That was step 1, which was basically stop doing damage, stop taxing people out of New York, stop creating the obstacles. Step 2 was come up with an affirmative strategy on how to help. After you stop digging, put down the shovel and come up with a ladder. And this is important for you to understand because if we're not careful, this will recur. Upstate was in decline, and there is an energy and a cycle to decline. Upstate was not getting the support from the state government that it needed. Not even close. Upstate was struggling, it was in the middle of an economic transition, and the state was nowhere to be found. Bob Duffy was mayor of Rochester. When I talked to him about the lieutenant governor's job, the reason he was interested was he was tired of getting ignored by Albany. And he said, I'm mayor of Rochester. I can't solve Rochester's problems alone. I need a partner in the state. And I have no partner in the state. I have no one to listen to me in the state. I said to Bob, you come, you be lieutenant governor. We're going to focus on upstate New York like never before. But lack of government investment in upstate New York, less political power in upstate New York, and that started to feed itself. And you have to remember this when you're doing your organizing and your thinking. The New York State Legislature is overwhelmingly from downstate New York. And people are people, and interests are parochial. And when you are a senator or an assemblyman, you represent your district. That's your job. If you're from Queens, your job is not to worry about Buffalo. Your job is to worry about Queens. And you have not only the majority from downstate New York, you have about 100 legislators from New York City. And they all have the same basic agenda. which is New York City. The upstate members, not only are they fewer, but they're diffuse. You have 17 in Western New York. You have 20 in the Finger Lakes. You have 13 in Central New York. But there is no upstate contingent because there is no place called upstate, right? I'm from Western New York. I have nothing to do with the North Country. I'm from Albany. I have nothing to do with Syracuse. So you have pockets of legislators upstate, and you have a unified coalition in downstate in New York City. And that's why when those votes happen, an overwhelming majority of the attention has gone to New York City. You have to purposefully come up with a strategy to defeat that. I've talked to the Business Council many times. Organize the upstate legislators as upstate legislators. You have to say to them, I know you're Buffalo, I know you're Rochester, I know you're Syracuse, but there's a commonality. You are all upstate. And bind together as upstate, so upstate actually has a voice. Otherwise, we're going to lose every vote to downstate New York. Now, under my administration, Bob and myself were the counterweight for upstate New York because we put our thumb on the scale, frankly. But this is a chronic problem that you're going to have to deal with. Because upstate lacked the political clout, they didn't get the right resources and attention they needed from Albany for a long time. And that then started the downward cycle in upstate New York. You weren't getting the government investment, you were losing political power, losing economic power, and then you had population growth being lost. Reverse the cycle, it's the exact opposite. Unprecedented government investment, more political power, more economic growth, more population growth, and then that positive synergy starts. And the positive synergy feeds on itself. When people believe the economy is coming back, the economy comes back. We've focused on upstate New York like a laser beam. Unprecedented investment, brought in the private sector to develop regional sustainable business plans. We decentralized decision-making, so it's not Albany making the decision. Buffalo makes the decisions about Buffalo, and Syracuse makes the decisions about Syracuse. We use SUNY as an economic engine because any business that comes back, the first question is always, who's going to do my R&D? Who's going to train my workforce? Who is my academic partner? And we've invested in SUNY to make it that economic partner. And then the state as an investment banker, we use our money to invest in business transactions that will create jobs. Period. You would think, when you talk to Howard Zemsky at ESD or Andrew Kennedy, that you're talking to an investment banker. We don't build anything on spec. We don't build dreams. If you have a business deal with a real business person who has wherewithal and will bring a business here and will create jobs, we will invest. But it is about reality and it is about jobs. And also we changed our attitude that we invest in sustainable long-term projects. I am not in the business of propping up local governments that cannot be sustainable. We pay in some upstate cities, some upstate towns, 20, 30, 40% of the budget. People are moving out, they're keeping the same level of government or they're growing the level of government. The taxes are rising, which is causing more people to move out. I'm saying to those local governments, you have to become self-sustainable. We set up the Regional Economic Development Councils. We invested $2.9 billion in them. They are working. This year, we put the REDCs on steroids. We have a $1.5 billion investment for three $500 million winners. They're called Regional Urban Revitalization Initiative plans. They're going to come in 3 weeks. We're going to announce the winners this fall. We've invested very heavily in tourism, which is working great. This is the new amphitheater in Syracuse on Lake Onondaga, which just opened up. They had their first concert. It was a phenomenal win. The whole I Love New York campaign, and I credit my colleagues in the legislature, we invested $130 million in an I Love New York ad campaign over the last 4.5 years. The revenue has gone up $8.5 billion to a record $62 billion. 100,000 more jobs, tourism related, because of our investment in the I Love New York campaign, which is a great economic success. So we made significant investments all across upstate New York, and the growth is undeniable. Unemployment is down in every region of upstate New York. And when you look at the economic growth in upstate New York, it is about equivalent or exceeds the growth in downstate New York. And that hasn't happened, my friends, in a long, long time. This July, upstate has the most private sector jobs in the history of the state of New York, 2.4 million jobs. People and places that were written off are now in the midst of a renaissance. You look at Buffalo, Solar City, the capital region is a nanotech capital. Central New York, we're investing in the state fairgrounds and the Inner Harbor. Rochester just had the vice president in to announce a photonics award. Utica, and I love this because it's a beautiful metaphor. Utica had a big presence from GE about 30, 40 years ago. GE left and went to another state, which I won't name, called Connecticut. And because the taxes were better in Connecticut, we just brought 500 jobs back from Connecticut to Utica. And there is a sense of optimism in places that were cynical for a long, long time. And the optimism is important because it's not just a mood, it is an economic statement. And when people and places have optimism, it feeds on itself. Buffalo was the most pessimistic community about their economic future 5 years ago. The most pessimistic. Today, Buffalo is the most optimistic, tied with Manhattan for the most optimistic outlook on the economy, if you can believe that. And that is then feeding on itself. The challenge now is to keep it going. And to keep it going next year, we have to keep doing everything right that we've been doing. We have to stick to the fiscal discipline. We have to stick to that discipline that says we're going to keep that state spending below 2%. And that is hard every year. Just the way you sit at a table, it's very hard not to eat the dessert. It's the same thing for the New York State Legislature and me. We have to stay below 2% the way we have for the past 5 years. We have to continue the 2% property tax cap. I want to do another round of tax cuts for businesses in the state of New York so they see that we're growing that momentum. I want to keep pushing local governments to incentivize to get down that property tax burden. There are 10,500 local governments. You don't need that many local governments. You don't need the villages. You don't need the towns. You don't need the sewer districts, the fire districts. You want to reduce property taxes, reduce the number of governments. I want to raise the minimum wage, which will put 15.7 into the economy, continue investing in upstate New York, and continue the education reforms. On the minimum wage, I want you to think about this. The minimum wage would raise the rate for 2.2 million workers. It would put $15.7 billion into the economy to be spent. And this money will be spent. These workers don't put it in a bank account and save it for a rainy day. They go out and they spend this money. On the flip side of the equation, I'm sure somebody might raise the question that it's going to increase the cost of doing business. There is no doubt. And that is the discussion on the minimum wage. Questions: what is the phase-in of the minimum wage? Over what period of time? And are there any offsets for business? Are there state tax cuts for business that can help offset the cost of the minimum wage? Because you could wind up with a win-win here. If you can raise the minimum wage, bring more New Yorkers into the economy, $15 billion more coming into the economy, phase it in, and have a tax cut program for businesses that's giving businesses a break that compensates, well, that could be a real win-win. And that's what we have to think about. Because life and politics and this state is about balance. And nobody gets everything they want. And we're a very diverse state. And our success has been achieving balance. And when I talk about how we defeat gridlock and how we make the economy work, it's balance. We have Democrats, we have Republicans. We have labor, we have management. We have rich people, we have poor people. We have upstate, we have downstate. When we achieve balance, the state works. When we are out of balance, the state doesn't work. And I want to achieve it again this year on this issue, and I believe we can. We want to continue building the new New York. We are already accomplished the most difficult feat. The most difficult feat, and what they said couldn't be done, was we got the stalled upstate economy running. The hard step we took, the hard step is getting that boulder moving. Getting that weight that is just sitting there and has been sitting there for years, to get that mass moving, especially when they said you can't. We got the upstate economy moving. It is moving, and that was hard. All we have to do now is continue the momentum, increase the rate, increase the optimism, and build on what we already have going, which is the movement of the upstate economy. Expand it and grow it. We have the embers are glowing of a new economy. Nurture those embers, blow on them, feed them, and let's make it a raging fire. This now is up to us. You did the hard part. Let's just continue to grow on it. And we will if we do it together, because I believe the potential for upstate is unlimited. I always have. I said that to you 5 years ago when the economy was stuck in the sand. I've worked in every state in the nation. You have every asset you could have. The history, the geography, the schools, the SUNY system, the workforce. We just didn't have a government, public-private sector partnership was working. Now that we do. Our motto is Excelsior for this state. It says it all, ever upwards. The direction is up. You haven't seen anything yet. We have more to do. And I know that if we continue to work together and we stay on this path, we can double down, and we're going to do it this year together. Thank you for listening, and tell me what's on your mind.